Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I think we can begin with today's meeting, and let's hope that everyone else will join us as soon as they can. So today we have final meeting of the session of the Bioinformatics Club seminars, which is dedicated to discussion of artificial intelligence and bioinformatics. We've already had 3 meetings so far, and these meetings have been sort of more specifically focused on particular areas. So we had a discussion of artificial intelligence in human genetics and genetic variation analysis. And we had a couple of talks about AI in transcriptomics and the analysis of gene expression data. Then we had last time, I think, a couple of beautiful talks about immunogenomics and about proteomic data and some of the applications of deep learning in those fields. And we conclude by a more sort of general discussion of AI methods in relation to biomedical research. And we'll have a couple of talks today, which will cover, again, these more general aspects of AI. We'll have one talk which would introduce some of the latest trends in the field of AI and language models, and some of the main approaches which are currently being applied, and the strategies that are the most promising, and some of the challenges associated with that. And then we'll have a talk about transparency and reproducibility and standardization in the field of AI-driven research. And with that, I suggest we start. So the first speaker for today will be Anton Changalidis, our longtime collaborator and associate bioinformatician at our institute, and also a graduate of the Maastricht University Data Science program, who will introduce some of the interesting ideas about how the field of AI and language models is developing currently. And then we'll jump right to the second talk, and we'll have a discussion after both of these talks. So that's going to be our schedule for today. So with that, Anton, please, the floor is yours for your talk.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yeah, we do.
So now you should see the screen.
Yeah, we do see the
Yes.
screen. Yeah, and now it's full screen, so everything
Yeah,
okay.
so cool. So today, yeah, as you already said, I will first introduce current challenges and trends and approaches that AI is using among different fields. I will also make some examples of how to use AI, how people use AI in medical field and bioinformatics field, but some of them, some of the approaches are not used in this field, and maybe some of our listeners will thought about some new ideas of how to use that. But first, let's start with initial part and what is basically LLM, large language model. You probably, all of us nowadays know what is ChatGPT, and GPT is for generative pre-trained transformer. And transformer, you first may think about this, but this is not actually this thing, but this is the thing. So it is basically some deep learning network, which consists of two parts, encoder and decoder. And you can input any type of data nowadays. It can be like texts or sequences of genomes or some protein sequences, so on. And it can be also some pictures, any type of pictures from medical field as well. And if it also can, you also can input them all together. In this case, we call it multimodal models. And it can output also anything. It can be the answer to your question. It can be annotation of the text or of genome, or it can be, for example, translation from one language to another. And these models, the models can be trained for specific tasks, but they can be also trained for all type of tasks and output texts, images, and so on. In this case, these models called foundational models. And why are these models so cool? This is so yeah, as I said, this is transformer model, and the main thing about transformer model that it has this attention mechanism. So what it is basically about. So here's an example on the text. So there are like two basic sentences. One sentence is the animal didn't cross the street because it was too wide, and another because it was too tired. So for us, we understand that in the first sentence, wide is the street, but at the second sentence, tired is not the street, but animal. And we understand that in the two sentences, where like almost every word except one are the same, but the it refer to different words, and we understand that, but usually models do not understand that. And this attention mechanism help model to understand what words or tokens on pieces of information related to what. And yeah, these models take into account context and also relations between the pieces of information. For example, in the texts or in the biological sequences or in images. And also, as I mentioned, and that is why these models are so cool and work very well. As I said earlier, transformer model consists mainly of two parts, encoder and decoder. You can use both of them all together, but also you can use just, for example, encoder model. And you probably heard about BERT. So this is bidirectional encoder representation transformer, but what it basically is, so you input something and it encodes your information, your text or anything to some other space. It can be just a space of 0 or 1, sick or not sick patient, for example. It can annotate all the text with, for example, all the gene names in the text. So zeros are not gene name and 1 is the name. Annotate genome, annotate anything. Second thing is decoder. So what it basically does, it makes next token prediction, next character or word. And for example, it can answer the question. Everyone knows GPT, and GPT is basically decoder part of full transformer. And also you can use full transformer. Usually it is used if you have different modalities. So for example, for translations, if you have one language, you can encode this language to the space and then from this space decode to another language. Or from DNA, make a report. So in this case, you can use full decoder, full transformer model. And yeah, this is basically how transformers work and why they work so well. And now we'll go deeper into AI perspectives on what are the trends now in transformers usage and in AI usage, and what are the differences between them and how to choose what to use. So yeah, I will here show what's technically possible now, even if it's not now related to medicine or biology. And first of all, let's talk about foundation models. So basically now all big, huge language models are foundation models, as I mentioned earlier, because they know general, they have general knowledge about different things. And yeah, they're trained on massive diverse data sets, and they can solve general problems of different types. So you may know like GPT, Llama, Gemini, and so on. And this is we can say that this is a foundation model for texts. The thing why they work so well, because they have a lot of parameters in them. They are very huge, and it's not easy to make it run on some local computers. They can be also multimodal, so you can use it for text, images, audio, etc. And they can also be fine-tuned for specific problems. Or also, if you don't have enough resources to fine-tune the models, you can just prompt them to or show specific I will show you later specific techniques on how to prompt without fine-tuning to have your problem solved. An example from bioinformatics, so these Jena LM and nucleotide transformer, they are foundational models, and they're trained not on texts but on the DNAs. So they understand the context of DNA, and then they can, for example, do variant effect prediction or splice site annotation detection and different things. So you should not train this model from scratch. They already understand. They understand how to understand the context of DNA, and you should just fine tune the model for your specific task, and then they will work very well. And this is example of like how you can fine tune the model. So this is initial training. You train just to understand the DNA sequence, for example, and then when you do fine tuning on already trained model, it's cheaper because you don't need to train the full model again. You freeze, there is like this snow sign, you freeze some part of the model, and then you retrain, you fine tune only last several layers for specific downstream prediction. Yeah, that's how it works. But the problem here is that scaling also has limits. After a certain point, performance will drop, and even if you have more data, models will start to generalize and lose some specific information. And that is where small language models come to the game. So now the trend is not in using very large language models, but small language models. So example, GPT-3, which is now very, very outdated. It has more than almost 200 billion parameters, and the size is also very huge. Llama has different sizes, but it's also starts from 1 billion to 2 trillions, and I think GPT-4 has, not I think, but yeah, I know that GPT-4 has more parameters, but we don't know specifically what amount, but these are huge models. And the idea of using small language models is to make small models trained for very specific tasks. And then once you have, and then train different models for different specific tasks. And in that case, training of each model is cost and energy efficient, and not just training, but also deploying it. So when you have a question, you don't need to put your question to very high consuming large language model, but you first have a router which understand the context of the question and understand to what expert, to what small language model to put your question. And then this model replies, this specific model replies to the question. And why to use that as well? Because these small models, in comparison to big models, can be run on smartphones or offline. And also, for example, if you have information of your clients which is private, and you don't want to put it to some server of OpenAI, and you don't know what they will do with your clients' data, you can use these small models which can be run easily on your smartphones, computer, anywhere. And you are absolutely sure that this data absolutely secured because it's locally on your own computer. And yeah, this scheme, it's called mixture of experts when you have a router, and then this router understands what a model to prompt then. Some examples of usage of small models. So first of all, this is like my imagination of how it can be used in the future. So we will have like smart glasses, which also have some small language model or small vision model, and it can be easily run locally on the device and not make API calls. But more current examples here are like several like small models which were trained specifically for specific tasks. So for example, this Comet model trained for like 100 tasks or so on, and it outperforms general models on 78 clinical tasks. Also, there is this startup, Hippocratic AI, and they trained, they have their model, not one model, but 22, not large language models, but already like small language models. They have a lot parameters in total, but when you have a specific question, you don't run your question on all these 22 language model, just on one of them. And that's why it's cost efficient and energy efficient, and also faster to use, and it can be launched locally. And here is the most recent article from NVIDIA. It's from September 2025. If you want to go from large language model to small language model, they invited some principles of how to go from large language model user to small language model. And they talk about like how to anonymize data, what data is enough to fine tune your small language model, how to do task clustering, how to choose specific small language model, and yeah, how to do this fine tuning and so on. So if you're interested in this, and if you have already ideas about large language model, think about how to deploy small language model, and like this this article can help you a lot. Then a bit different field is the reinforcement learning. So initially, what is reinforcement learning? Is like, yeah, usually how you train the model. You have the training data. You put it to the training loop, and the model is trained. But once you have the model, sometimes you like their questions, answers to your questions, sometimes not. And the idea is you not just train the model, but after you trained it, you provide new questions, and then you make rewards for the answers you like, and you don't provide rewards if you don't like the answers. Or for example, you maybe saw that when you use GPT, chat GPT, sometimes they show you like two answers and ask you what do you like the most. And that is probably also usage of reinforcement learning with human feedback. So, but the problem is that it aligns, this technique aligns the model for the human preferences. And which is not always good, because we like beautiful answers with beautiful wordings, but we don't do fact checking. And that is why another techniques came to the game. So for example, this reinforcement learning with AI feedback, when you ask, instead of doing human human evaluation, this interpreter who provides you reward, you have another AI model which do scoring of the answer of another model. And this cuts down cost by 10 or so, according to some investigations, in comparison to to human feedback, because it's cheaper. Also, what can be used is constitutional AI, which was invented by Anthropic. And the thing is here that you can include it to AI feedback, but not just ask AI to score the model, but score the answer, but also provide it with some constitution, so rules how to provide the answer. So for example, like do fact checking, do not make some general answers, provide me very specific answers, check in this database, and so on. So you provide the instructions on how to format your answer. So maybe you can say like, I want markdown answer, or like markdown table, and so on. And this AI then can check this constitution, and this also improve learning, improve training a lot. Examples. So this article, it used reinforcement learning with human feedback for radiology, and they improved model in such a way that it achieved almost 80% of consistency with humans in radiology tasks. But as far as I checked the internet, and I have not found a lot of medical or biomedical things that use RLHF, or things similar to it. And maybe in the future, here can be your research. And yeah, here's another like more detailed way to do this reinforcement learning stages with AI, which you can check here at Anthropic website. Now more practical things. If you just have your like, for example, if you prompt GPT on how to improve its answers. So first of all, You maybe heard about this, like one-shot and few-shot prompting. So instead of just asking to provide the answer to a question, first show the model how to do this. So how to do these answers. So for example, if you want here, like you want to classify, is this positive or negative? I don't know why here is a positive, because yeah, it should be negative like labels to some texts. You can show the model, like classify these conversations. First, make 3 examples, and then on the first, instead of examples, ask it to do this task again. And since you already showed some examples, it can do much better. And here is examples on from my head how you can use it in your medical field. So for example, if you want to do diagnosis from note, you can provide it first with already 2 worked cases. So where you from notes you made a diagnosis, and then ask for third case, do diagnosis again, and provide next steps, and it usually works well. And yes. So and like here also rule of thumb, if you want to the model to more generalized things, so not just not just not just like do according to instructions, but think a lot, then it's better to fine-tune the model. But if you want the model capture specific patterns, better to use this thing, and it works quite well. And yeah, the prompt engineering, there are also another things on how to prompt your model. So for example, you can ask the model to think step by step. So instead of just ask the question, just add this, like let's reason this out step by step. And this is not really applicable for if you use, for example, already like GPT-5, because it in its instructions it already have these things. But if you for example wanna use some llama locally and or other models locally, then you can add the things to the instructions. Also, there is this thing as retrieval augmented generation, where instead of getting some insights fully from the model, you can also retrieve some things from knowledge database, and then feed the model both your question and the knowledge. And yeah, here is the example of like they made the, oh yeah, okay, wait a sec, yeah. Next step from just taking information from knowledge database is use agents. So what it basically is, so as I mentioned earlier, you can use some external knowledge or databases or some files, or just you can also get information from the internet. But if you, for each question, do all these things, it can be very expensive. But what is better to do is to have some AI agent, which is basically also a large language model, but it's already like know what it can do. And for each question, it first think what to do. It can think, okay, I want to get some information from knowledge database, or I want to go to my own database, or I want to go to the internet and try to find the information. Maybe it want to use some already like written functions on, like do some computations, and this agent understand what to do, and then based on what it's already done, provide the answer. And one good example is also a recent publication, which called BioChatter. So what they basically do, they have a lot of uh, they basically made a chat interface for a lot of bioinformatics tools and knowledge tools, so on. So you basically write what you want from the chat, and it does not all the bioinformatic work, but you can set it in such a way that it can call some bioinformatics tools for you and provide the answer. But yeah, you can this is Python package, so you should set it up for you, but then it can work kind of well, and you can check further yeah, in this link. And last thing is privacy preserving. As you may think that like in medicine, you usually work with clients' data, which is kind of private. And if you wanna train your model uh, on some like private data, and for example, like you work in the hospital and your friend work in another hospital, you both want to train the model, one model where you can incorporate data from both of the hospitals, but you cannot share the data between each other. And in this case, you can use federated learning. So what it basically is, you have one general model, which is somewhere on the cloud or somewhere in another computer. And each of you train your local versions of the model. Then you send your weights to this general model, and you together update the weights of the model. And then you do it multiple times. And there are different techniques for federated learning, but that's how it basically works. And there are a lot of mathematical research in this area. There are less real implementations of federated learning because it's kind of new field. But you can check just federated learning, or you can check here they like elaborating on how to use federated learning for example for mammogram data. And yeah, I think this is one of the fields where future research will be very advanced, especially in the medical field. And another thing is differential privacy. It's more mathematical thing, but this is the general idea is how to make same result without using like specific data, for example, of some Alice or of some patient. But this is more now in the research, and this is more in the research. So this is very like a lot of mathematical theorems are now uh, developed in differential privacy, but it is, as far as I know, not really used nowadays in practice, but maybe in 10 years or so. And this is the last slide. I want to show some problems. I just showed you a lot of like approaches which you can use for your medical fields or for your biology. But one problem is that do not so use archives and use read archives like medRxiv, biorxiv, just archive, because now it's standard in LLM development. The problem is that the field is very rapidly evolving. And if you just use articles from peer-reviewed peer-reviewed articles, then you will be very outdated, because to be like published in peer-reviewed journal, it can be like take, I don't know, 1 year or so. But nowadays, people just publish it in archive, and that's it. And even the article attention is all you need, which is like the initial article for all transformers area. It was published just on archive, and it has a lot of citations, like everyone now used the ideas from there, but it was never published in peer-reviewed journal. But the problems now are that like testing on different data sets and like benchmarks are not really comparable to each other, because if you test on one benchmark, you can get a very high score. And if another guy tests on like another benchmark, it can get lower score, but maybe your models are both good just because, but their difference is just because you have used different benchmarks. And also, one of the problems that are now arise, because now language models are trained like almost on all the internet that exists. And also language models are trained on benchmarks as well. So there is a leakage from the training data to test data. And it's not very fair to test nowadays on some old benchmarks, because language models use really benchmarks to train on. And this figure show that like if you compare the like scores of language models of data sets before the release of language model and after, so the score of models which were trained on data set which were before the release of language model much higher, and that is because probably models were also trained on this data. And that's basically it. I think we have questions like after the second part, and so yeah, that's basically it for my presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very nice talk. Due to some time limitations that we have today, we'd like to do the Q&A session after the second talk. With that, I would like to welcome the second speaker for today, Dr. Fotis Simopoulos from the Institute of Applied Bioscience and Center for Research and Technology, Hellas from Greece. With his talk on standards in AI, and after that we'll have a Q&A session for both talks.
Thank you, Yuri, very much for that. I think that should be fine. Let me actually do it now in present mode. And I'll try to be very fast, and I'm very happy that I'm right after Anton because a lot of the points that he raised at the very end are very well aligned. So I'm hoping it will make a bit more sense. So that was a good planning from your side here as well. So thank you for that. And I do have to apologize. The constraint is on my side. I have yet another Zoom in about 30 minutes, hence the whole kind of changing of the planning. So again, I'll try to be quite specific. I will skip all this stuff if you want to set the context. But what I want to, I really would like as a slide deck, although it's now almost a decade old, is to give things in perspective. So if you look at the astronomical data that's being produced is about 1,000 petabytes per year. X, Twitter at that time, about 20 petabytes per year. YouTube, again, at that time was about 2,000 petabytes per year. But if you go to genomics back in 2015, we're talking about 40 petabytes, 40,000 petabytes per year. That's almost 2 orders of magnitude larger than astronomical data, which means that when we talk about big data, it's definitely biological and what we're discussing right now. So for that reason, as you very well said, machine learning is applied in too many biological areas, from cell biology, genome, proteome, metabolism, from LLMs to large networks and everything in between. I'll make a short kind of sidestep here, talking about FAIR. Out of curiosity, I usually ask this question on an audience. I'm not sure it's going to be much of a response here, but most people have heard about FAIR. I'm not sure how many have understood what FAIR is about. So I've kept this slide, which I quite like. It's not mine. It's from Turing Way, which highlights what the 4 different elements of FAIR are: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And although these guiding principles were specifically defined for any kind of research object, it's primarily being applied in data. The problem is that every time someone talks about FAIR, the first reaction is, why should we care about FAIR at this point? And again, I'm stealing this slide from 2018 from the Commission when they did a cost analysis of having something FAIR, data specifically in this case, and they realized that the cost of not having FAIR data is about 10 billion per year, which is roughly 8% of the Horizon 2020 budget per year. Or if you want to have a different way, it's about 400% of what ERCs and infrastructures are getting combined. So although it's a number of the overall research expenditures in Europe is not that much, it's like 3%. If you look at it from the point of view of what it costs for our own research when it gets to us as funding support, it's a quite substantial amount. So FAIR for data is kind of not resolved to an extent, but is getting there, mostly because a lot of requirements are about to make data open, make the metadata available, list them in the appropriate repositories. There are requirements from funders as well. So there's a lot of effort on that front. But if you're looking at non-data objects, this starting to become a bit tricky. There are a lot of ongoing efforts, and I'm having a few options here from research software, computational workflows, training material, virtual research environments, of course, AI, which will be my point in a second, but these are all emerging. If you look at the data from AI systems right now, you'll see that there is one trend that is worth keeping in mind. If you look back in 2000s or mid 2010, you see that the primary sector where AI systems were published or created were primarily academia, this red thingy. From 2017 onwards, this trend shifted dramatically towards industry, with a big portion now being academia and industry collaboration. AlphaFold is one of those interesting examples. The other point is that this shift towards industry is also worth looking from a point of the resources required for that. The right-hand side figures are both the same, both show kind of the computational requirements versus the dates, and the one below is keeping on the biological models in mind. And we'll see that there is a very distinct shift towards the computational requirements, and also where all those things start to emerge, with the vast majority of them happening in the last 3 years, more or less. Not that they weren't before, but the most prominent one, especially in computational, in teraflops, in petaflops, actually here, these are all very recent. So why am I highlighting all those things? So if you look at the fair aspects for data, there's a lot of effort. This is a very simplified graph. The top line is basically the data. If you look at this bluish line, which is trying to get off the ground, but is still there, that's software, which is people are recognizing now that it is quite useful to make sure that software can be reusable as well, but they haven't invested that much. The AI part is the one that started from zero and then popped up over software by 2023. And this is because it's quite recognized right now that there are major challenges in AI, specifically in making models more standardized, that they invested significantly more effort compared to the underlying software. This is something that I want you to keep in mind, because I will be circling back to this figure a few times already. So as Anton said, there are a lot of steps, and I'm sure you've seen these so far. There are several steps in MLOps, in life cycle of machine learning. If you try to simplify them a bit, and this is an effort that was done in This Is Data Alliance effort, you have the problem definition on the top, that's one. Then you have, in parallel, more or less, the data gathering pre-processing, the green part. But also, on the other hand, you have to identify both method, model, and evaluation based on the data. You cannot use a model or a method that doesn't fit the assumptions and the expectations of the data that you're relying on, which is one of my pet peeves as well. Based on those two elements, you are creating your model. You have to validate it, both internally, which is the step 6, but also externally, which means you test against data that is not part of your training system. And then, depending on your overarching fields, whether it's industry, academic, or something in between, you might deploy this as an actual model to be used in the production level, and you need to monitor how it performs, or you basically use it once and then you store it and you share it with others, which is a very traditional academic context. In both cases, you hope that the model is either used by others, in which case you have to circle back to the data part, gather data, retrain. This is the fine-tuning part, and the foundational models, again, that Anton mentioned before. So this is how it fits all together, more or less. Again, simplified. So if you really look into it, you'll try and figure out that there are a lot of other steps that are currently obfuscated. But as a rule of thumb, that's the main step. So in all of those things, there are a lot of choices and decisions that a researcher, a machine learning scientist actually has to take. So if you start thinking about fairness for machine learning, there are a lot of questions that are still outstanding. Models are not data per se, although they have a static element to them. You have a model. It's software, maybe, because they are executable, especially if you're talking predictions. You take an input, you give an output. So there is an executable aspect to them, but it's not software as well. So there is a quite open discussion on which part of a model you need to apply, what is the context, what do you need to define when you're talking fair. And this is quite important to emphasize, because if we cannot get in an agreement on what are the foundational elements of how to describe a model, ultimately we will end up consuming significant resources, from energy, from time, from funding, to create something that ultimately will be a one-off thing that you throw away just because no one else can realistically use this again. So making sure that these aspects are captured early on and we have an agreement is quite important. And of course, fairness is just one set of challenges. There are too many of them, and I'll just highlight the few that I cropped up here and there, from reproducibility, from validity to statistical mistakes to figure out how you can use the correct sequences in an actual ML model that has been published. Too many things to code that doesn't work if you actually look into it close enough. All those things are critical problems in machine learning. This is why we need to have standards. And there are a lot of efforts out there. ML Commons, ONNX, and Hugging Face, they are quite evident and quite extensively used right now. ONNX is a format for neural networks primarily. Hugging Face is a registry where you can deposit models. Again, there is a very specific subtype of models that are available on Hugging Face. ML Commons is how you can define data sets. There are good practice defined for pharma, which are trying to set up their own set of requirements. And also there are the recommendation is defined by infrastructures, and this is where DOM comes in. So DOM recommendations is essentially a set of recommendations of good practices that rely on the fact that this enormous growth of publications for machine learning, and this is just until 2024, and as if you look at the query, it's already constrained enough, has a very inherent problem. The question, again, this is where I'm asking this to the audience, what is the percentage of these publications, of these ones, that actually have no evaluation whatsoever? In other words, they created the model, they said, okay, I've run training, I created something, and then I predict that you have cancer, something like that. I'm oversimplifying, but you can understand my point. I'm pausing for dramatic effect because this is where I stop to ask people. But the short answer is that around 20% of the publication had zero information about it. That's 1 out of 5. And this is an article back in 2020, so it's not that old. And if you check and you conform based on the background of the authors, if there is no computational co-author in the article, this number actually goes to around 34%. So 1 out of 3. So this means, and this is the usual example that I have when I'm talking to wet lab scientists in life sciences, is the equivalent of me as a computational scientist make a publication saying that I took some samples, I processed them, and now this is the data without information about the protocol, how I did the sampling, what are my controls, anything. I did an experiment, this is the data, I can do all the analysis now and nothing else. So this essentially translates that out of this 20%, there is no information about training or testing, no cross-validation, no statistical tests, nothing whatsoever. It's like, take it. So for this reason, the Elixir infrastructure, this is a quick slide about the infrastructure itself, put together an activity under the machine learning focus group trying to address this particular challenge. This is the focus group. I'm happy to be one of these colleagues, and there are more than 100 members right now. And one of the outputs was the DOM recommendations almost 4 years now, where essentially it is a set of recommendations for supervised learning, specifically to include standardization. What I want to emphasize is that they are pretty much self-explanatory. Any person with some computational background from machine learning will recognize all of them as like, this is the default thing to think about. DOM is an acronym, it's Data Optimization Model Evaluation, and essentially data stands for, well, you need to have information about where you got the data, how you split them, and whether you actually checked about if there is any redundancy in there, if there is an overlap, if you have any biases, like stuff like that. Optimization is if you created a prediction model, what is the algorithm you used? Did you think it out of nowhere, or did you actually figure out a one that fits into your problem? What was your encoding? What were the parameters? What were the features? And ideally, can I find the algorithm somewhere, or is it something completely hidden somewhere in your head? The model itself that you produced, can you interpret it, or is it a black box? If it's a neural network, in all likelihood, it's a black box. how much time did it take, and where did you actually run it? If I need 4 hours, but using the entire compute infrastructure of trees, this is highly unlikely for me to be able to reproduce it using my own laptop in somewhere in Thessaloniki. And finally, evaluation, which was the starting point of the whole thing. Please give me some metrics from basic scores and measures to whether you compare it to something else to check whether it still holds, to any kind of statistical and cognitive evaluation. So these are the main questions. So now that we have established that, over the last 2 years, we have put together a registry. So curators are taking articles that are published or are being published for machine learning, and they are annotating them. This is one of the cards of an article. And essentially, these questions are trying to fill them in. So we have kind of a scoreboard based on those. The important part is that this was actually picked up by GigaScience in 2024, which means that now that was moved around. So if anyone tries to submit now a machine learning method in GigaScience for acceptance, they will be asked in the submission process to upload the corresponding report under the DOM registry, so that they actually need to think of those things together. At the same time, because this is effort, we have connected this to OrcIDs, which means that if anyone actually annotates the article based on the DOM recommendations, they get recognition for that. So it's something that they can link onto their profile, saying that at least I annotated like 6 articles, maybe one of them is mine, but at least I did the effort and had the community. And we plan to continue this more and more to include all other elements as well. This is my last slide for DOM, and then I have a rapid spread to another point of standards. So now that we've captured kind of to an extent, reproducibility, we're moving one step further to talk about sustainability and reproducibility and reusability. And this is one of the articles that we've currently submitted again for review. We're actually in round 2, so hopefully by the end of this year, this will also be in natural methods. And these are, again, key recommendations to go one step further and look into more elements of sustainable AI now, and what would be a key set of recommendations to expect. You can find the actual article in archive, so you can look through these recommendations already. But I'm hoping that now we have the new iteration, the actual practical recommendation will be embedded as they are in DOM. So my last part, and I will take less than 4 minutes on that, I promise, is to go why we care about standards. So this is, by the way, it's not my slides from here onwards. It's based on the AI policy crash course by Blair at Frost, and she did an amazing job putting a whole list of resources on that, and I definitely recommend going through those. So it is quite important to think that when you're discussing AI models, etc., you need to think what is the impact of those things. If you create a model, you actually need to be certain, or at least aware of where this will be used in the social context, and what will be your stakeholders, what will be the implication of this use. If I create a model that predicts whether a flower is an animal is a dog or a cat, the impact is significantly less to a model that identifies whether a cell is carcinogenic or not, because the overall use of this model is significantly different. There are a lot of factors that take an effect in AI systems. This is just a list of them. But more importantly, it's not just the human factors, it's also the material factors. When you put together an AI system, you need hardware. This it tells means that you need neuronals and minds to fuel that. You have fuel, transportation, assembly, data centers, energy and carbon emissions, water use, land use. These are all resources that are being used for AI and for creating a model. So it's creating a model just for the sake of it right now is not becoming an easy choice. It's becoming a choice, and I'm quoting something here from Microsoft. It's literally taking water to feed a computer, which is a really key message in my mind. So if you talk about AI systems, this is the current definition of an AI system. Most people stop at the orange part, a technology system that processes data and other resources and prediction, recommendation, decision, and more content, but ignore the other part, which is within a socio-material context. In other words, where and how you're putting that. And the last part is with some degree of autonomy for human actors. It means that it can act by itself. And the reason I'm saying that is we need to start thinking about ethics as well, which connect the standards. This is a whole set of ethics. I definitely recommend looking through the Alan Turing Institute of AI Ethics and Security. Hey, they did an amazing brief on these points. But I'm sure everyone have seen a few of them already, from deepfakes of Obama in 2018 to reinforcing inequalities in Europe in universities, to all other fun or maybe not so fun cases of AI hallucinating and creating problems. So there was an assessment of a lot of AI ethics documents to find out what are the main principles. This is again a list. This is the article that I took them from. And you'll see that there are six main pillars: fairness and non-discrimination, which everyone thinks about; privacy and accountability, which again 97% of these documents are taken into consideration. But moving on, we're talking about transparency and explainability. Safety and security is not that much, and then we have professional responsibility, human control of technology, and promotion of human values, and almost just half of them are actually looking into those elements. And human values and actual technology are even less considered under this theme. Why is this important? This is a kind of a funny story where Air Canada, that uses an LLM to ask for customer service, actually were ordered to take responsibility for the choices that the LLM that they had for customer service hallucinated and basically made up rules for a customer to follow, which they didn't exist, which made a very strong argument on who is actually responsible for predictions that an AI model is creating. And this leads to the governance system. In EU, we currently have a whole set of initiatives around governance. European AI strategy was in 2018. We have the AI Act in 2021 and the AI factories in January 2024. But the regulation means that we need to have very clear understanding of what this means. The AI Act is quite limited right now. It has these four main pillars of unacceptable risk, high risk, and limited minimal risk, which roughly correspond to, as you can see here, unacceptable risk is about fundamental rights and values. This is unacceptable. High risk is anything that goes to health, safety, and fundamental rights. Transparency risk is about impersonation, like chatbots and deepfakes are still in transparency risk, so it's not high risk. And anything else from recommendation systems and spam filters are minimal risk. But this is extremely vague. And that's why we are expecting the next couple of months have an update on the AI Act on how this is actually going to be applied. There is the AI Act Explorer, which if you haven't seen, I recommend going through because it's an interesting read. Well, not that interesting, but it may ring a bell here and there. And this is my last slide, as I promised. These are all elements that need to be put together. So standards are right here. The fact that we have standard and assessment accountability tools like the ones here, like the datasets and the model cards, they are present there so that you as MLOps, as researcher, know exactly what to follow. But these are not by themselves. They need to be tied to regulations, legislation, so that we can make sure that whatever is produced at the end is actually meaningful. And with that, I can stop talking and stop sharing.
Hey, thank you very much for a very nice talk. I think it's there are very many interesting things and many things I personally would refer to later on to read in more detail. And I have, if you let me start the discussion with a question related to actually the LLM-driven research, because it's a little bit one thing when you develop a model from scratch and when you can publish it all together, and quite another thing when you are using some commercial model, such as, for example, GPT, which is obviously not available in any form except just making an API call or putting something into the chat. So, is there a way? What are the ways to do research, for example, solving some tasks relying on commercial models, so like GPT, and at the same time making it as transparent and reproducible as possible. So if you are trying to if I understand correctly, you cannot do a research with a commercial model that is fully adherent to the standards you mentioned. But maybe if you could say a few words about how you can do that like the best possible way, given all of the limitations that are associated with using a commercial model.
So that is a very interesting point. I'll start by saying that I would not recommend using GPT as it stands as a basis for an actual research model, mostly because there is no transparency on how it's constructed. And because you cannot, right now, we don't have effective benchmarks on LLMs to make sure how they are performing. It's quite difficult to assess even the results that we can logically assess that they make sense, whether it will be useful. There are options of doing that. So if you need to use GPT or a commercial LLM for that matter, you need to be very explicit on how this is being used, what is the context, the model, the version, the time, and ideally freeze it as much as possible. So that's why I start the whole point of reporting based on FAIR. If you cannot have consistent metadata descriptors of your model, such as ChatGPT, you cannot reference it for future reference. The fact that I have ChatGPT 4.1 now, for example, doesn't mean that the model I'm using today will be the exact same model as tomorrow, just with the same label. I have no information about the underlying structure. As a scientist, as a researcher in AI, I would actively avoid doing that because I have zero control, zero information, and zero understanding of how this is structured. But that's just me.
Yeah, I'm asking because there's actually a lot of we've made an investigation a little time ago regarding how the LLMs are used in various aspects of genetic diagnostics, for example. There are a lot of applications that rely on GPT, various versions of GPT, of course. There's a lot of people who are trying to use GPT. Some, of course, some is just like chatting, which is not that complicated, and but some people develop more complicated frameworks and pipelines that rely on making calls to GPT. That's why I was asking that question. Yeah, I think that
I also want to add that nowadays, for example, OpenAI and ChatGPT, they store some data about you to like a database, internal one. And like, for example, if you and me will ask the same question, they will provide the different answers just because you can like you can turn it off, but on the basic level, turn it on. And in that case, like for me and for you, it will provide just different answer just because of it reminds of me some different things, and it knows about you some different things, and that's why they will also provide different answers.
Yeah, and that's actually what was my second question, because that was I was also interested in, is whether we can at all expect these kinds of research to be reproducible, because again, in my personal experience, indeed, I have seen GPT making different answers to the same question, and even I think for pretty much a sort of bare new account at OpenAI. I think that still, even if you have no history of talking to GPT, still you can possibly get different answers. So correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I understand, it's still possible that the same question will result in a little bit different answers, and hence that actually is to me it seems like a huge problem for reproducibility in research altogether, because you cannot expect a model to give you the same answer. So if one person got, for example, like a score of like high accuracy on these even on some benchmarking data set, yeah, is it like 100% guaranteed or not that the model will get the same accuracy when another user tries it? So, again, if we are talking not about some open source model which is like fixed, but some commercial solution. As far as I understand, this is really a point of concern. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
with all the commercial ones nowadays, you cannot just fix it.
Yeah, and the other question is again elaborating, continuing on that, which is again my personal interest, and I will jump to a question from the chat. So if we are talking about using things such as GPT, for example, I know that they've made essentially the earlier versions of the model not accessible through the web server, but are they still accessible, for example, from the like the API or something like that, or are they like completely gone? I think it's a question for Anson, who's
Who
much more.
who's going? Can you repeat the question? The last part.
Yeah, the idea is so we now in the web interface we have GPT-5. It's essentially the only possible version, and then we had
But for
obviously.
API, you have elder one as well. Yes, that's
Yeah, okay. So you can query the older ones.
yeah,
Okay,
yes. But I'm not sure that even there they like the model is freezed. So they say like they have like specifications of the versions, but I think that anyway they can they can change something. So like we're not 100% sure that this is like the same like today, and like in a month it's absolutely the same model.
Okay, I see. Yeah, we have a question from the chat, and I think that nice if you both of you could comment. The question is related to what we discussed, but the main question is, what's your opinion on using AI, the LLMs in particular, as an assistant for medical counseling? So whether it's something that's worth giving a try or not in the medicine in the current state of things.
I can I can give an initial response by flipping the question. Ignoring AI, and I have an assistant in my medical consultation. Um, would I trust an assistant that is an excellent typewriter, an excellent note taker, but has no medical expertise? Probably the answer will be no. But I would trust them to keep notes of what I'm saying. I'll trust them to do an effective summary of what I'm saying. And I'll trust them to do good retrieval information of if I need something specific. So the answer is not yes or no. If the question is, should I rely on an AI model to do a medical diagnosis? The answer is a strong no. I would not probably I would not do that even for an actual human doctor. Most of us go to have a second or a third opinion with human beings. Having an AI just give a response, it's highly unlikely. But I would argue that if you compare the diagnosis, the quality of service between a doctor who is working by themselves and a doctor who, again, same experience at those levels, that is assisted by an AI, the second one will probably be a better option. So what we need to figure out, and that was my whole point for my meandering response, is we need to define limits and ways of interacting. It's not a solution that fits everything and suddenly none of our work or experiences can do anything. It is to define what are the expectations and also what are the limitations of any AI model. And I'll shut up again.
Oh, thank you very much for Anton. If you have anything
I
to
just
add, please
wanted
go
to
ahead.
say like a very brilliant answer. I don't really have something to add. Yeah, like the models have their limitations, and the main thing is that we have to know like what are the limitations. And maybe to add to the thing that like for example like about publications and about like that some providers some like publishers articles don't have like even testing of the of the model. Nowadays, for like a big like linguistics and AI conference, there is like specific compulsory part which is limitation. So previously they didn't have that, and starting from this year they started to have this as a compulsory part. So now it is like for all like ACL and ICLR conference, there is compulsory limitations part. So like everyone should specifically state what are the limitations of their model or method or like data set or something. And this is very cool.
I think, yeah, Fotis, I think that you've mentioned that you have to go for another Zoom call. So I think that yeah, we can let you go. Thank you once again for joining us today and for giving a wonderful presentation. I think that we'll talk about other questions if there are any. But yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I do apologize again that I need to run that fast. And it was really a pleasure to see Anton's presentation. It was quite insightful, and I think I learned a couple of things as well. So thanks. It was very much appreciated. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. And I think I have a question to Anton, which we can discuss without Fatis. So basically, when you were showing your in your presentation, you have dedicated quite a bit of attention to all sort of agentic systems. And here again, the question which we've previously discussed regarding the sort of reproducibility and how it's done. I wonder what is the way to go with the sort of agentic things when it comes to reproducibility, because we as humans, we are required to report or if it's not required, but we are advised to report all of our actions. If you're doing your research, we're recording all of the steps that you're doing. So it's a rule of thumb that if you're doing a research, you publish all your scripts, you do a detailed description of the methods, etc. But if you're doing something using an agentic system, what would you consider probably a good way of doing that? So as far as I understand, probably you can make an agent like record all of its actions. I think that GPT also does that, this partially, but maybe there are anything that you could mention, maybe something, some ideas that you've seen about how it's done, whether it's really possible to like log all of the activity, and whether you've seen anybody do that really for like this reproducibility.
I'm not sure about
Discuss.
reproducibility. Yeah, as so what I can say is that like all the principles that I mentioned about like constitutional AI. So the more specific the question and your like your prompt will be, the better the answer, and not just the better the answer will be, but also the more reproducible. But really, like, that is true that you cannot fully control the agent, and that is maybe also good way, because like you can think of the agent as of like another human, or like your colleague, which sometimes your colleague can do one thing in different ways, and which differs also to what you thought it can be done. But what is good ways to do is when you do, for example, your agent, or when you use, check if it logs things, check if it shows like what it want to do. Or for example, from what I mentioned, when I do like now like coding, like automatic coding, for example, in the cursor. So this is like a IDE, which basically like you also prompt it, and it writes the code for you. Nowadays, it's not just writing code, but it first of all make a to-do list of what it wants to do, and then for each step it says like this is what I want to do, and this is like how I check it, and then it start to do like step by step. So it's more or less like a chain of thought, but which is automatic and like under the under the engine. But it first showed the to-do list, and it first do one thing, then checks if it works, and show the log. So for example, it can run your program and show the output of the program, or show the output of the tests, and after everything is done, the best thing you can do as a programmer or like doctor is not just trust AI, but anyway check the output, despite the fact it can be like huge output. But anyway, if you do it manually, I think you anyway will face the same things. But you first do this and then check the logs and all the way of thinking. And now even like be critical about what AI is doing is least you can do if you want to use AI and if you want to make some steps automatically.
Okay, so that's what I hear from your response is that really there is already like a lot done in terms of logging and explaining other actions on part of AI agents. So that's good to know. At least that's something that gives hope that the AI-driven research, especially when using agentic system, could be at least partially replicatable. Because yeah, that was a little bit what worried me. Because if we talk about all sorts of deep learning models as a black box, and here you have a black box essentially that analyzes the data. So you in theory, ideally, you want this black box to log as much of its activity as possible in order to be able to really
Also, like I have not tried this BioChatter, but I think it anyway not just do all the analysis and just provide you with the answer. I think they should have something like a logger of like what steps it wants to do, or also the better way if you do if you want to implement this thing, I think is to ask for confirmations. So not just start doing things, but first ask the confirmations on the steps from the user, especially if this is some like critical field like a medicine or like medicine, where like if you do something wrong, somebody can die. Yeah, I think in this case, it's better first to ask the user to accept that all the steps are correct.
Okay, thank you for the comments. Yeah, regarding biochatter and all the ecosystem, yeah, I believe that they should have this pretty much detailed. At least as far as I know, again, the people behind this are investing a lot of effort into that, and well, I hope that maybe we'll be able to invite them to join us someday and maybe tell us more about that. Okay, I think that we can wrap up today's meeting. Thanks for everyone who is still with us. Yeah, and this concludes our third session of seminars. And follow our updates. We'll provide of course, the recording of today's meeting, and we'll share all of the plans for the upcoming sessions as soon as we have them. Yeah, so thanks to everyone. Yeah, and hope to see you on next sessions. Thanks to Anton for his presentation. Yeah, and goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Yuri.